Welcome to episode number 20 of the Men and Community Podcast. On this week's episode, Matt and Carlo discuss all things ambition. Carlo shares how he defines value in everyday life. Matt shares the Japanese concept of IKIGAI, and together we explore how these ideas can make us more joyful. Thank you for being part of our community. All right, everybody, welcome to episode number 19 of the Men and Community Podcast. We're almost 20 years old, almost episode 20, almost time for double decades. We're going to have something special for episode 20. I have no idea what it will be, but it will be legendary.
Well, and then we need to talk about whether we do something exciting for 20 or 21. Like, which do we celebrate more?
Yes.
I know my 21st birthday was way better than my 20th.
Okay. I don't know if I remember either of mine.
But you remember my 21st, though.
Do I? Remind me.
We talked about this a couple episodes ago. That was 50 Shades of Grey night.
Oh, that's right. That was your 21st. Yeah. Go back and listen to, that would be episode 17, I think, or 16. One of the two. But there's a good story in there about Matt's 21st birthday. That was I think about that weekend all the time.
Yeah, I do too.
All right. So thank you again for joining us for episode number 19 of the Men and Community Podcast. We just, as we often do, we filmed 2 episodes back to back. Last episode was about the Barbie movie. Matt is still wearing his pink. So as you can tell, it is filmed in the same day. And we're high off of that fantastic chat. So let's get into our questions. What's your worst driving habit? I have to admit this.
For context, while he's thinking which one he wants to share, Carlo drives a fantastically fast Subaru. Is it a WRX or an XTI? I never actually know the difference between the two. I just giggle because STI.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll go fully technical on it. Nice. The year that I got my car, it officially became the Subaru STI on its own. Every year prior to that,
it was just a disease.
No, it was the Subaru WRX STI, and then several years before that, it was the Subaru Impreza WRX STI.
Interesting. Usually, never mind.
And we're not going to get into details because I'm a Subaru nerd. I love my car. But yes, I drive a fast car. The thing that I'm going to admit to, I'm going to admit to 2. One is a terrible thing, and one I find amazingly hilarious. If you park like an idiot in a parking lot, I will fold the mirrors in on your car, and I will in specific fold the passenger mirror. So when you get into your car, you have to get back out of your car to unfold your mirror. This doesn't work terribly well on Mercedes when they have auto fold mirrors. I haven't overcome that challenge yet. Okay, the bad thing I'm going to admit to is that sometimes when I am at a long traffic light, I will get distracted by social media on my phone. And the worst it's ever led to is someone honking at me because I didn't notice the light changed, but it is a terrible habit. It doesn't happen all the time, but I need to stop.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, I think that's completely deplorable. No, I'm just kidding. It's
It is.
It's obviously dangerous, but I think it's very common and relatable. I'm certainly guilty of it now and again. I think for me, my worst driving habit is probably just good old fashioned speeding. Times I like to go fast and I also like to anticipate when somebody's going to try to change lanes in a way that is evident that they did not anticipate the upcoming turnoff. So, sometimes I'll create a situation to try to punish their lack of proactivity. And so, create situations where they have to honk it, where I have to honk at them, which actually happened at 7 a.m. this morning. And I don't like honking at people, but I certainly don't like doing it at 7 a.m. But such a situation.
I'll call you out for your stupidity at any time. Doesn't matter to me.
Fair enough.
All right. Pull your card.
Well, this would have been a good one for episode 17. At what age were you in the best shape? I would have to say at age 29 and a half. Well, maybe age 30, somewhere in there. I was in very, very good shape last year. And, I was still in pretty good shape, but not quite at the, I certainly peaked or dipped, however you want to think about it, last year, and looking to get back there in the fall before our trip.
Nice. I'm going to very happily say 32, which is now.
Nice.
Yeah, that's, I feel like every year since I had my fitness transformation has just been better and better. And that doesn't necessarily mean the scale is less, but it means I feel more capable. I feel stronger. I feel more just able to live a healthy life. So I'm very, very proud of that fact.
Love it.
Yeah. All right. So this episode is one that's kind of been spurred on by a recent experience of mine. It's also something that as soon as I started talking about it to Matt, he was like, oh, I know the name for that. So Mr. I have an exercise, I have a graph, a pie chart of something. He's ready and prepared. So I hope you're excited. But the concept here was that, in my belief, you kind of fall within two different categories. Okay. And you could be the kind of person that when it comes to your work-life balance and your aspirations in life, you have a job that you perhaps enjoy or makes you enough money, or you are just fully content to work your hours of operation, whatever they may be. And when you are off work, you are off work. And you fill your time outside of that with almost anything, but it is never of a concern whether that thing forwards your skills or makes you money. Okay. That's what work is for. So you could fall into that category. And the other category is the kind of person that I fall into, where it's this: if I'm not at work, whatever I am doing is contributing to either my income in some other way as a side hustle or as another business, or it is contributing to a new skill set that I am learning. And I've talked about this in past episodes where, you want to try and learn a new skill, you want to try and, do something, but very aspirational. And the struggle with becoming that kind of person is that there's almost a sense of guilt that comes with not doing the kind of thing that falls in that category, right? So the idea of sitting on the couch and watching a TV, or for me, playing a video game, or, anything that doesn't improve my skill set, make me money. And it's to the point that even the small little things that I have going that I just find enjoyment in, I try to find a way to make it a hobby that pays for itself. And the biggest example of this would be my 3D printing, which I've talked about in shows before, where, it doesn't necessarily, it's something that I do because I truly enjoy it and I find it fun and it's a skill that I enjoy learning. But I've hit this point where I feel I invest enough money, time, and energy into it that I want it to at least pay for itself, right? And I feel guilty when it doesn't. Oh, I just spent more money on this thing, and yet it has never made me or hasn't made an equivalent amount of money. And I feel guilty, therefore, to do it, irregardless of the joy that it brings me.
So I find this really interesting. I am also in your dichotomy, a type 2 person. A lot of things that I'm doing, I'm doing not for the money. Like, obviously, like, I like that I get to get paid for it. But they just also happen to be things that I loved, that I've happened to be able to monetize because I love it and I'm good at it. And what I find, which is cool to reflect on, because it's quite the opposite of what you're saying in terms of the guilt factor. I actually find that I experience guilt because I have people that'll say to me, well, like, you're always working. Like, what do you do for fun?
Sure.
And it becomes really, really challenging for me to explain, like, yeah, I do that for fun. Well, but you're working. Well, yeah, I'm having fun and making money. Like, and it just becomes this really interesting thing. And so it's led to this, like, self-consciousness, I guess, where I feel, and maybe that's just me projecting, I feel that people think I have no work-life balance because they're like, you're always working. Like, yeah, you do fun things, but you're always working. Like, what do you do? So when people are like, oh, what are your hobbies? I feel real self-conscious because I feel like I don't have hobbies to share, because a hobby implies that it doesn't make money.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a kind of a good point, because there was a point in my life where I remember people be like, so what do you do for fun? And my response was, well, I work a lot. As if there was no opportunity outside of work for fun. Right. But what kind of has brought on this, I think, this topic and this thought process for me is that someone close to me in my life who I adore, but I don't think quite has an understanding of who I am as a human being at this point in my life, asked me, and she goes, this 3D printing thing, like, at some point, the amount of time you give it has to make you money, or like it's taking away from other things. And I believe she was referencing a couple other things I could have been doing with my time instead of, doing this thing that I enjoy. And part of me at that point in time really wanted to go on the defensive. I wanted to go and say, well, this is one of the few things that I do that it doesn't really matter to me that it makes me money or not. It's something that is improving a skill that I can use in other areas. Actually, in fact, I do make a little bit of money doing it, or, just go on this defensive of trying to prove this person wrong. And I didn't say anything really about it, because I didn't feel that person really needed a reason for me to do it, because I have my own reasons for doing it. And I'm still wrestling with the whole concept of it, and knowing you and I, by the end of this episode, I'll feel much better. But it's this idea that not every single thing that you do with your time and energy needs to be something that in the grand scope of things makes your life better in a traditional way. It can be something that makes your life better just because you enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
Right? So, Mr. Graphman, Mr. I already have this figured out. Would you please enlighten me as to what this is actually called?
Okay, so let me give you a little bit of context. I mean, you certainly shared your story on this, and I've been having similar or different reflections, but in very related sense. And something that I've been struggling with a lot in the last month or so is trying to navigate where I'm spending my energy and my capacity. You talk all the time, and we have a finite amount of energy to give. Well, I'm starting to feel like I'm at that point where I'm giving as much energy as I have and needing to make some really intentional choices about where that energy is going. And I've been wrestling with this for a while. There was an opportunity that came up that I knew I wanted, but I couldn't really pursue it because there is no time or space. And if I was going to actually be successful getting the opportunity, that would have actually been a bigger headache, because I wouldn't have had the opportunity to dedicate myself to it in the way that I'd want to, given that this is something that I can see being like a really cool component of my career moving forward.
Sure.
Very cryptic. I know. Doesn't matter. Well, it led me to this place where I decided that a few weeks ago that I was going to go on this little camping trip and spend some time in trying to unpack what had been a very busy summer, but also unpack how I was feeling about where my capacity was going in different areas. And so in the same way that, you're in this place trying to interpret and validate the ways that you're spending your time, I was also trying to validate the ways that I spend my time, right? Like, is this thing something that means enough to me to keep going? Is it making me enough money to keep going? Does it impact enough people for me to keep going? Well, it turns out that, I was listening to, believe it or not, we listen to other podcasts other than our own. We don't just listen to ourselves talk. We actually like listening to other people talk too.
We do listen to ourselves talk.
That's true. It's like 50-50.
Yeah.
Yeah. But nevertheless, there's some people that have as soothing voices as we do. And so sometimes I put on a different one, especially when they have a really nice British accent, which in this case, this podcast, well, he's an entrepreneur and a business leader who now has a podcast. for those of you who aren't familiar, definitely recommend going to check out Diary of CEO, which is a podcast by Stephen Bartlett. He's a part of the UK Dragon's Den, business leader in the UK community. Who's been very successful in his businesses and has really cool perspectives about corporate culture, amongst other things, which is something that I really value. And he introduced this concept that certainly is not his concept, but he spoke on it in one of these episodes that I listened to, which really helped create some framework for my thinking on this, called IKIGAI, spelled IKIGAI. Obviously, it's not spelled like that in Japanese because those are English characters, but you get the idea. And the idea of Ikigai is it is the confluence or the perfect combination of the four things I just mentioned. It is the things that you're good at, the things that have the potential to make you money, the things that you feel could be beneficial to the world or the people in it, and the things that you enjoy the process of doing.
Hey.
And if you Google it, you'll find different overlapping Venn diagrams describing that if you combine, two of these things, it's your mission. You describe two of them, it's your passion, your employment, your vocation, right? But at the very center, if you overlap all four of those things, those places where what you're good at, what makes you money, what benefits the most people, and what you enjoy the process of doing, that is Ikigai at its center. And the argument being, of course, that we should pursue careers or we should just pursue that, right? That should be the ultimate fulfillment, is finding something that combines those four things. So I really set out to try to create this better understanding for my own capacity using this framework. And so what I did is I started by listing all the things that I'm good at or could be good at. This included all the things that I'm currently doing, which is, the work, our podcast. It includes things like my side hustles of my dance fitness and the motivator and hype man work that I do for certain parties. It included things that I haven't started yet, but I've always been thinking about: writing a book, becoming a post-secondary instructor. It includes a lot of these other things. And then I got stuck because in my head, the process was, you write this list of things you're good at, and then you write down which things have the ability to impact a lot of people. And then you write down which things have the ability to make you money. And then you write down what things you actually enjoy doing. And somehow, somewhere, there was going to be a race, and there was going to be a certain number of things that won the race. Those are the things that are going to get my capacity. I was able to write down the list of things that I'm good at doing really, really quickly. We've been through this. I'm not very humble. But then I got stuck. And what I realized is that every single thing on that list has the ability to impact people. It has the ability to make me money, and has the ability to allow me to enjoy the process. So it wasn't that I wasn't able to do it that way. I realized that I had to rank them instead. And it wasn't just, is this thing capable of making me money or capable of having an impact? It had to be in relation to each other. And I had to start making these evaluations based on relative, does my dance fitness work impact more or less people than writing a book would, right? And start making these judgment calls today in this present state. What are these things are more impactful than the other? Which of these things are making me more money? And which of these things are more fun? And what I found was kind of refreshing, also kind of a pain in the ass. The overall sentiment was that nothing I'm currently doing, with the exception of a few tweaks here and there, nothing that I'm currently doing based on that framework, I feel I shouldn't be doing. But, and where I think that this would be a really cool exercise for you, is that it's the recognition of, while the gold standard, that pie in the sky, platinum level ideal is to have things that accomplish all four. That doesn't have to be true of every single thing. I think what we should be aspiring to is not to find one thing that accomplishes all four of those components, but to find a balance in our life where all four of those things are satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some people are lucky enough to live a world where they have one job, one calling, where they can make money, love what they do. They're really freaking good at it, and it impacts a lot of people. But I think it's equally impactful on an individual level to find a balance of things, careers, side hustles, hobbies, relationships, vocations, volunteering, that accomplishes all four of those things in their own way together. And I think we can still create ikigai with doing that. And so when I think of your printing, that's what I think of. Is it something that right now you're loving the process of it? And maybe the development of that skill is going to start to raise the other two that I think in your own calculations is sitting a little bit lower on in terms of impacting other people and making you money. But even so, I know that you're making steps right now. You just started a new TikTok account for your printing. So you're working on the impacting people thing. I know you probably didn't think of that intentionally, but like there's ways to raise the profile of each of these things. But if it's high on one of those categories, it shouldn't be discounted just because it's not high in all four.
Yeah. And thank you for that. And I appreciate your outlook and you sharing the story of the experience you had over the last weekend. Because, you know, when I was texting you and I said, you know, where are you? What are you doing? And you're like, oh, I'm in Banff on a, what did you call it? The Matt Leon?
Call it the Matt Leon corporate retreat.
There you go. With a party of one.
Party of one.
You know, I thought that was a really cool idea. And something that I think we all acknowledge is that, you know, having time away on our own is beneficial for almost everybody, but it is rare for someone to actually move forward and do that thing. So I'll give you props for that. And thank you for sharing that. And the interesting thing about this, contrary to maybe some of the other episodes we've had where I've, you know, shared some of the struggles I'm going through, is that I didn't have a moment, even during this conversation with this other person, where I felt that I was doing something wrong, right? Like I knew and have known for quite a while that the things that I include in my life and the things that I devote my energy to generally are things that have a benefit for me. Otherwise, I don't do them, right? I've kind of grown past doing the thing to satisfy the wants and needs of other people if it doesn't also help me in some way. And I mean that in a way of not, I don't do anything unless it benefits me. I'm in a way of, you know, there are certain examples or certain times in your life where you're forced to do something. You feel you're forced to do something for someone else, even if you don't want to. And I've kind of grown past that and stopped pandering to that kind of situation. So that's not so much what this was. It was more of just kind of this feeling of internally being one of those two kinds of people. You can already struggle with devoting your time and energy to things that you want if they don't meet some of those categories. But then also having some of that external influence of someone who, whether they believe or you believe, are thinking of your best interest, to then question something that you have decided you gain value from, was more kind of what spurred on this thought, right? And, you know, further to your point, I have passion in several areas of my life. I have the ability to impact people in several areas of my life. I have the ability to make income in several areas of my life. So for me, if we're going to focus in on this idea of my 3D printing, it's the one area of my life that I feel my creativity gets to thrive. And that is something that I have felt for a long time that I've lacked. I used to think to myself that I was not a creative person. And I know that not to be true, but it isn't until recent that I've been able to explore this little bit of arty side of me that I've realized just how creative I can be, right? So it wasn't a matter of me needing to defend my position to anyone else. It was more of an insult, feeling insulted to a degree of someone questioning my own decision. Right. So I think the point that I want to bring up on this vein of the topic is the idea that what we do with our lives if it is something that you find value in, that doesn't hurt anybody else, and is in some way beneficial to you or someone else, nobody really has the right to question that, right? And this will apply for people in, I think, both of those categories, is that if you find joy in whatever it may be, if it's not hurting anybody, don't ever let anybody try and take it away from you. Right? I spent enough of my life working. I work a lot, right? I spent enough of my life doing that. I spent enough of my life devoting my time and energy to someone else. I spent enough of my life giving up and sacrificing the things I felt joy in because I was supposed to be on a path that led to more money or more fulfillment or more this. And I never felt as whole as I do now, filling those 4 cups from different areas. There is not, this idea that you had of this one perfect thing that fills all 4. Maybe it exists for some, but it does not exist for me. So, I felt challenged in a negative way. I felt insulted that somebody I thought or I hoped would be unsupportive and understanding showed that they weren't in this area. And again, I adore this person, but they missed the mark on this one. And it made me want to speak to the idea that you are more than capable and more than allowed to do whatever it is that you want to do to provide yourself with fulfillment in those areas.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I can tell that you're in a really vulnerable spot just in terms of like the level to what you're sharing right now. And once again, I want to show my gratitude for being in that space. I want to keep you in this space for a moment because I want to ask a question that on its face isn't aligned, but I want to hear how you answer in this space where you're feeling the things that you're feeling. We use a certain word in this podcast. And if you were to like do a word count, I bet you we use this more than any other word in our entire podcast. And I don't know that we've actually stopped to intentionally define what it is. And given the space that you're in right now, I'd love to have you take a shot at defining it. So based on everything you're feeling right now and this experience that you're having with this person that you care about very much, how would you define the word value?
Value, it's so hard to describe.
Let me give you a second while you're thinking.
Okay.
Knowing you the way that I do and hearing what I'm hearing, it seems to me that you feel like this person is in some way critiquing the value of the time that you spend, and that you feel that this person doesn't hold a similar value proposition that you do for the things that you value in your life. And I think that is a place where, you and I in particular, and I hope others listening resonate with this as well, that whenever somebody in our life doesn't completely align with the values to which we hold, whether it's values, plural in the conventional sense, or the value we're able to bring, and somebody doesn't recognize the value that we bring, that can be tremendously hard to process, whether it's an ego thing or a confidence thing or whatever it is. And so I think this comes back to value. And so, yeah, I'm just curious in this space where you're feeling this, how you would define it.
Okay, so there's 3 things I'm going to comment on. 1, value is important in the way that you've just described, because when you listen to any sort of relationship psychologist, dating expert, friendship expert, et cetera, the number one thing they tell you about is you got to find somebody where your values align or complement. Otherwise, a strong bond can't really be formed there. Because if you're the kind of person that values family and you try to spend time with someone who doesn't value family or form a romantic relationship with someone who doesn't, that's going to cause issues.
It's interesting. I'm reading a book on partnering right now, and that wasn't the first thing. I haven't got through the book yet, so maybe it'll come up, but just so you know, that wasn't the first thing in there.
Okay.
Go on.
Then there's the concept of, this person in my life has a different sense of value of them than I do in this particular area, for sure. But I don't ever expect anybody to have the same value of a particular thing as me if they're not if they're not living the same life as me, and nobody's living the same life as me. Okay. And this is a really cool concept. And this speaks again to my ability to let my creative side flourish a little bit. As critical of a thinker, a mathematics, a physicist, a science fiction nerd as I am, there are these little brief glimpses of what I like to consider the more artistic side of me. And this would be one of them. So if I were to describe or define value, I want you to imagine, go ahead and close your eyes if you need to. I really need you to see this with me. You are in a pitch black room. You are not personified. You are a feeling. You are a consciousness. And in the middle of this little pitch black room, you see just the ember of a spark. And it's there. It's constant, but it always looks like it's on the tip of burning out. Value is that brief moment where that spark gets a little bit stronger, a little bit brighter, a little bit bigger. And the more you do this consciousness of yourself, the more it experiences things that bring you value, the bigger that spark gets and the greater the light is. And there comes a point where when you fill yourself and your life with enough value that this spark is bright enough to fill the entire room. And there is no worry of it ever going out. And it's so bright that it can now brighten up other people's rooms. That to me would be how I would define value.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. But that's, there's not a thing in my life that I value as a positive thing that I don't feel makes me more whole, that makes me more better as a person.
That makes you brighter.
That makes me brighter. And we've talked about this in the past. There is moments where you're overwhelmed with work or overwhelmed with responsibility, and you haven't had the opportunity to do those things that bring you value and passion, and you feel like less of yourself and you feel less able to give. Right? So, swinging back to our idea of, does everything need to make you money? Does everything need to make you better? Does everything need to forward a skill? No, but should everything that you're devoting your energy to bring you value? I think so, yes.
I hope that everyone who's ever listened to our podcast hears, even if it's just this 5-minute interchange, because I think that I can imagine that people that listen to this and don't know us as well as others might have gotten the wrong idea hearing the word value being shared. And I think that the way that you just shared value is so compelling that it'll change the frame of reference for many people going back and listening to some earlier episodes. And in fact, it's already something on my list to do, to listen to all of our episodes again. But I know that I'm going to be coming at it with a new frame of reference, just thinking about the new way that you've shared in terms of how you understand what value means. Thank you.
Thank you. I've never articulated it that way before. Also, we don't listen to ourselves, so I'm not going to go back and listen to our podcast.
I am now. If I had known that you were that profound from the start, I would have been paying closer attention.
All these undertones. Yeah, we've talked about so many different things on this podcast, and it's kind of fitting that we're getting so close to episode 20 or episode 21. I don't know if I've ever shared this on the podcast, but in our first few episodes, I was exposed to this idea that once you do something like 5 episodes, the amount of podcasts that do over 5 episodes significantly decreases. So there's something like 1 or 2 million new podcasts started a year. And if you do over 5 episodes, it drops down to like 500,000. And then, you go over 10 episodes and it's like 250,000. But if you go over 21 episodes, you are one of the like 50,000 podcasts that actually continue. And I think that's a great thing to think about, not only, of course, in the podcast space, but in the life space. You give something long enough time to flourish and you kind of stand out from that competition. Think about how many people that have started a diet or have started a new hobby or have started this and just not given it time to flourish and be bad enough to be good at it, right? And we've talked about this with learning a new skill. But we have always said from the very beginning of this podcast that we do it because it provides us value. And of course, we want you guys to listen and we want you guys to watch and we want to have social media engagement with you. We want to provide you guys value. But we do this because it provides us value. So when you try to think about it from the imagery that I've given you, I hope that you understand what that means to me, right? Because this podcast is a lot of work, right? Recording like this isn't terribly hard, but what you guys don't see is the 15, 20 minutes of camera setup and takedown and the hours of editing and the cutting into social media clips to try and grow our community. Is it beneficial for us to have more people listen? At this point, no. Neither you or I make any money off of this podcast, but we do it because of that little ember that grows a little bit bigger when I have somebody comment to me and say how much they love the show or give me a piece of feedback or something, right? There's a reason we do this podcast, and it isn't for money. Right? It's does it grow my skill set? Sure. I've learned all sorts of editing tricks. If you've seen any of our new social media stuff, it's a little bit different. I'm trying something new. Okay. But the value that this podcast brings far outweighs what the traditional maybe business world might think that it brings. And it's super funny because, we host our podcast on Podbean. And I get emails almost weekly. Put ads in your show and you could make, extra money. And maybe at some point there will be a reason to do that, right? But at this point, it doesn't benefit anybody enough to throw an ad in the middle of our show. So I've completely ignored them. But even something like this, in the entire spirit of what our show is about, we are being told all the time it has to make you money. And I don't necessarily think it has to, because the value is there in other ways. I've been talking a lot. Say something.
No, I appreciate everything you're saying. And like I said, it's so timely for me as well with all of this work that I'm doing to reflect on everything that's going on professionally in my life right now. And it's, I think oftentimes we think about spring cleaning, and we talk a lot about the idea that you're going to, whether it's cleaning out the garage or the basement or the spare bedroom or whatever it is. I think that the idea of fall cleaning is underrated. I think that there's something really special from a cleansing point of view in approaching September as a new year in the same way that you would January. At least, certainly in North America and other places where you run a September to June school year, I think it's embedded in us from a young age to think of September as starting something new, taking on new challenges. And so I've always thought of
of September. Of course, this will come out probably the beginning of October, but in any case, the fall as the time to really start to think about the ways that you can put yourself in the best position to take on those new challenges. And whether it's that, shiny new backpack and that new set of like pens, pencils, and erasers and protractors to get ready for that school year, whatever that is, giving yourself the opportunity to have those sharpened skill sets and tools to be able to take on those challenges is, I think, one of the beautiful things about fall cleaning that I really like to try to embrace every year. And so I think this conversation for me has just been a wonderful, wonderful addition to that work that I've already been doing in the last couple of weeks in terms of trying to understand how I'm going to give myself the tools to take this further. And I think for anybody who is listening, my encouragement to you would be to, again, take that time, whether it's an hour, 2 hours, half day, full weekend, whatever your schedule allows, and take some time to connect with yourself and ask yourself that question. What tools do you need? Obviously, physical tools or otherwise, to take on the challenges that are coming your way from this October onwards, and just see where that takes you.
And I love that. And again, you are the master of creating or having an exercise that can be done to help you realize certain things. And I think the layer that I would want to add to that is that often in our day-to-day lives, we fail to be present. I know I'm certainly guilty of it, all right? But if you can take the moment, next time you're doing something and you're like, I'm really enjoying this, try to have that present moment of thought to identify what the value in that particular activity is for you. And this can be anything. Again, it doesn't have to be something that furthers a skill or makes you money or is acceptable by your peers or whatever it is. If it is something that you find you feel that inner spark, take the moment to be like, yeah, this is a value that for me, this is something that is core to me. And when you first start to identify those little moments of value, you start to realize that there's a lot more of them in your life in other areas, or you start to acknowledge that there isn't. And when you realize that there isn't, you become almost addicted to finding ways to get more of that feeling.
Yeah.
Right? We are, as human beings and animals, are socially and habit-driven creatures. We are, dopamine addicted. It's why our social media is such a problem. Imagine if you could be as feverishly attracted to things that brought you good value as you were to scrolling on your social media forever or binge watching a Netflix show. Can you imagine how many amazing things you would fill your life with? So I think it's super important that you sit down and go through the process of identifying, the things that do exist or could exist in your life. But you may also be doing a lot of things that you don't already realize are part of this. And I want to encourage you to have that moment of introspection in that particular moment.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. We can't spend our time always thinking about things we could be doing. We need to understand what the impact that the things we are doing already has on us and the world around us.
And, I think it becomes fairly evident in our show that Matt and I can talk about a lot of things together, but there are very obviously episodes that each of us hold more passion in. And I find it funny because often when we record 2 episodes at a time, and there's usually one I'm very passionate about and one that you're a little bit more passionate about. And again, we can discuss them both together, but it's always interesting listening back, whether I'm editing or listening to a new episode or an old episode, to see how we play off of each other in that passion. And my one hope for you on this episode would be that you can feel what I feel right now, right? That you can feel the gratitude for the value that this brings, that you can feel the excitement that I now have of having this realization that, you know, other people be damned. My value, my passion, my life, my energy, I'm pounding on my chest right now, is what is important to me, because it will make that, at the end of the day, will make me better for other people, because I am better for myself.
I think I've shared this before, but the best way for us to serve others is to serve from the saucer, meaning you have to pour enough into your own teacup that your cup is overflowing. And then we have the privilege and probably the responsibility of then being able to serve people out of what has spilled over into our saucer. It means that when we're on the airplane, we have to put our mask on before helping others, because without that, any of the value that we seek to bring to the communities of which we are a part of is not sustainable. We have to be able to serve from the saucer. We have to be able to light our own spark, our own flame first, and we have to be able to do it that way. Otherwise, all of the efforts, all of the work that we do to try to uplift, to support, to empower, to impact the worlds around us is going to fall short.
And I would challenge you to show me an example of a public-facing person who has found fulfillment in their life and has not tried to find a way to give that to others. Right? You don't see it. Because there's something about being fulfilled that makes you want to give that to as many people as you can. Again, which is another reason why this podcast is so near and dear to my heart, and I know to Matt's as well, is that we find fulfillment, joy, and passion in it, and we want you guys to have that as well. So it's about that time for us. So
in a minute, we're going to lead a little bit of gratitude to close this out.
That was better. Good job.
Thanks.
Okay.
Me and my Lizzo were practicing.
Good for you. All right. Don't ever go to karaoke with this guy. shows everybody up. And it's to the point that even if you got a second mic, you can't be heard. Can't be heard. Just pointing this out. Maybe we've gone to karaoke recently. Okay. I'm going to start off with the gratitude this week. I've always struggled a little bit being the kind of person to accept a compliment. And it's something that I've had to work on very hard over the last few years, to be able to take those and like actually accept them and not, second guess myself. But there's something about the way that you give compliments that there's never a guess in my mind about whether it's genuine. There's never a guess in my mind about whether you truly mean what you're saying. And I think there's a very special skill in that, to try and have that true, genuine connection with someone. So my gratitude for you is that you're never stingy with those compliments, and that you give them in a way that makes, I think, almost anybody feel valued and feel like it's a genuine compliment. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I just feel that you've given everybody in this episode that's watching, listening to this, such a gift. And I feel like I've received a gift from you today in the way that you have illustrated what value can be and should be. And I think that's really, really special. And I'm really, really grateful for you being able to share that gift with us. And I'm going to double down too, because I think that something that is very, very hard is to be able to share genuine, authentic, vulnerable feelings when you know someone is going to be listening, and when you haven't had a chance to process all those thoughts before they come out of your mouth. And it's something that you do very naturally, and you're very open to doing, and I am very, very grateful for that as well. So thank you for those gifts.
Thank you. Well, at that point, folks, it's another heartfelt, passionate, value-bringing episode of the Men Community Podcast. We thank you for your time. We thank you for being here with us. Matt, you want to try and close us out a little bit better than last episode?
Go light that spark.
I like it. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.